get my vaccines. So, I am fully fully vaccinated. I waited till everyone was out, every single one of them was out, and I got vaccinated. And they claim that autism comes from the vaccines or whatever conspiracy that they're going to throw at the vaccines. I've already had autism, so I wasn't going to get it again. I mean, obviously, you can't get it again unless they're going to give me savant syndrome, which is a form of autism, savant syndrome. But I mean, I already had every single one of the COVID shots, and I waited out and I waited for every single one because Joseph Biden and employers made it mandatory to get it. And so obviously the group of individuals were the ones whining and complaining and protesting, claiming to peacefully protest. So they weren't. They were voicing their opinions very violently and aggressively and threatening the people who are getting vaccinated and the people whose rights were to get vaccinated. When it became their body and their rules, the people telling people that they were at fault for getting vaccinated were the ones that they were told they were crackpots or crazy for believing a conspiracy theory, and that they were going to, for example, for me, I can't get autism, so I don't know what their arguments were. Uh, my grandmother believed that the vaccines were like that, but that was her beliefs. But she never voiced it against us, or she did once or twice. But then, we just said we agreed to disagree and went our merry way. But then there's the Republicans, because my grandmother is a Republican. But there are the other Republicans who are not so uh, willing to cooperate, who make the good Republican people look bad, are the people who are the midline to mid to right look bad. And it just really backfires when it comes to trying to show support, because I know there are bad people on the left as well, but there are a lot of bad eggs on the right as well. Um, and when it comes down to forcing our body, and talking about our body and our rights, from them voicing about transgender people. I mean, I'm not trans and I will never identify that way. I'm perfectly happy being a male. Um, and I would never say that I'm something I'm not. But then when it comes to abortion and all that stuff, they're talking about that. I don't believe in abortion. I know that they utilize it against people with disabilities, and results of those situations sometimes result in disabled or deformed individuals, and so they abort them instead of learning to take care of them or give them up or that situation. So why can't they just practice birth control or practice, safe sex? Um, I mean, I don't know what's there's a lot of problems in the gay community where they can't even practice safe sex. I mean, that's what happened with PrEP and the development of PrEP. And I think that's why monkeypox got so bad. And a lot of these viruses is because the development of PrEP, which only prevents HIV, but it doesn't prevent the other stuff. And the other stuff, they might have it and then it gets more immune and the viruses mutate and become a stronger thing for everybody else, and it ruins it for everybody else. So, I mean, I understand that, but that's what vaccines were made for. And vaccines were also made to prevent those things, like a cold, which COVID was like a cold, which affected a lot of older people, which is why I was social distancing. Also, another thing I want to cover is the during COVID when everybody was social distancing. One of the hardest things to do, especially when you have neighbors who are constantly harassing you, who believe that it was a hoax or that it was a conspiracy theory, is if they go out of their way to either chase you, harass you in your complex, and or my downstairs neighbor liked to smoke weed, and the secondhand smoke would travel up, to the point one day they were barbecuing, and it did flood into my apartment. Um, and I know he did it on purpose various times because he got several complaints about him. Well, he had drinking parties with his friends and harassed me while drawing and painting on my patio. You can actually see him in videos calling up to me, making bird call sounds just to annoy me, with the intent to harass me after the police told him that they do consider it harassment, and that I did inform him via police officer that it was harassment, because the group they decided to be part of, they tried to make it look like they were being profiled. Um, when state investigators investigated, they told a different story, a different tune, saying that they weren't harassed, but complaining about them, they felt harassed. So they tried to make it look like a different scenario than it was. Um, and then, I moved because they wouldn't stop the harassment, and they increased it to the point where they were turning the lights off on me. And I was living in a roach infested apartment, that I had death threats thrown at me, and people were blaring the horn and throwing homophobic slurs while driving by. Same group of individuals, who hang out in the MAGA group, who also didn't like that Joseph Biden won the election, and knew that I did not support Donald J. Trump. Um, said nothing about anything around immigration. I don't ever really voice my opinions on those, because it's none of my business. These are American, individuals who are of that group, who wanted to tell other people, especially my aunts being Asian, didn't like me studying their cultures, to get out of the country. That's what they were telling me, and getting out of their complex. So I was isolating myself. I was social distancing. I have older family members who are, part of the vulnerable group. So I was, making sure that I was distancing myself. I don't have very many people in the social outlet, to talk to. So I didn't have parties. I didn't have people over. Um, I mean, there's an occasional dating app, but I even told everybody on the dating app that, I was distancing until this whole crazy thing was over. So I mean, I really didn't have anybody over, or speak to anybody. Uh, the one thing I will say that I noticed with distancing, though, especially for how long COVID lasted, was, I mean, and I could see on the far right side why a lot of there was arguments of group settings being closed down and everything being closed down, not being able to do anything outside of your social groups, or your family situation. Even sometimes family wasn't allowed to see other family because of the vulnerability, or you just were so isolated. People's mental health were definitely a big factor of it, like you being so isolated for so prolonged of a time that, um, people might lose it or might lose touch with reality. And I noticed even my health, I with my disability, it was being, especially exploited by my neighbors who were trying to make it look like something in my head or it was a fiasco going on, something internal. Um, and then when I, obviously was audio recording a lot of the things that were happening. Cameras weren't showing that of what they were doing. To me, was being shown. Um, and so then they got upset when they got caught, and they tried to make it look like it was me, something going on with me. I mean, maybe some of the paranoia got up there, but obviously it was so frequent that I couldn't live a happy, peaceful life because they were trying to get revenge for being reported themselves. So it affected my mental health, because they were obviously not healthy with theirs. That's why they were medicating with weed or whatever, alcohol of their choice, is that they decided at the time. Now, I have no problem with weed smokers. What I do have a problem with is when you're an asthmatic and then you're subjected to secondhand smoke and they have no care or concern about everybody else around them. Employers could drug test you and you could have secondhand smoke and you could be fired for it, which, in their point of view, they didn't care if I got fired from my job. Um, they would feel one less problem, lose money, lose tendency, moves out, one less issue. So they really didn't care. So based on the contents of their character, which is what I was judging, um, criminal record contents, repeat offenders contents, continuing the pattern, noise, 3 a.m. in the morning, screaming at his girlfriend, being on the patio seeing his girlfriend with black eyes, smeared makeup, crying, scared for her life, couldn't leave her home. The dog being threatened, that was her dog's. Veterinarian assistant. So I've been trained as a person who's taken care of dogs and run my own dog walking business. Something was up. Um, and I tried to inform his girlfriend of the situation, but she was, um, being threatened by him that she couldn't talk to anybody. So something was obviously going up, and the individual next door to me was, not of right mind, not of sane mind. And when he was a person who, I guess, crazy understands crazy in this situation, that's what therapists have said. Crazy understands crazy, because therapists are considered sometimes to be crazy as well, by the point of view of some other people, that they will say crazy understands crazy. Well, or in his case, game might know game, and I know when he was in fact playing people, and that there was something obviously going on with him that was not right. And the people who are willing to jump on that, the delusional group of people that were pro Trump, pro, religious beliefs forced on you, when you don't have to subscribe to their beliefs under religious freedom. They were the first group to jump on the crazy train, riding off the rails into whatever situation that they felt they needed to do. And so they took advantage of the fact that I had no social outlets, was isolated, and that there would be no witnesses around to, um, where they would cover up. So if you go into the guy's criminal history, which he forced me to find, demanding I prove it, he's got various shoplifting charges. He's got various robbery charges. He's got drug dealing charges. And his wife, who knew about it and probably has bailed him out of it, the situation, um, acted like she didn't know me. And she was one of the main people trying to perpetrate the harassment to me. And they tried to use my brother's wife's loss of her, um, my nephew's twin, and my uncle's loss of his son. My uncle's been dead for more than 15 years. Um, and he overdosed um, from drugs. He was obviously medicating himself, grieving the loss of his child. And they were trying to blame me for being an uncle, a gay uncle, and going after me for ridiculous reasons, for defending my family. And um, I I didn't even meet my nephew until he was like 3 or 4 years old, because of the distancing was happening at the same time. And yeah, I didn't know much of my family. I still haven't met my other nephew who lives in New York, who just is fairly new to our family. And I just met my other niece, and she's been around for like 2 or 3 years. So I just met her once or twice, and then we barely even get to see him. So, um, yeah, people fabricate stories when they feel like they need to, especially when they're trying to cover up something like, for example, this perpetrator, um, who was a neighbor, was trying to cover up his shoplifting history, and his drug dealing history. And the people that were harassing me were the people he deals to. So he was obviously covering up his assets. And he's probably been in prison, just like the wife beater that lived next door to me. Was in prison a few times, and obviously criminals like to think alike and hang out with each other. And so he was obviously trying to work the system. And when I took him to court, the judge saw that clear as day, especially serving him in prison when he claimed that he didn't do anything. And he delayed all that time, forcing me to get the paperwork. And he ended up landing himself in prison, harassing his girlfriend. And he could have been a different situation if he accepted the paper outside of prison, right away, and then we go to court. But he was in prison at the time for the things that I said he was doing, and his girlfriend already proved under a plethora of evidence. And the same court justice had handled another case with him over domestic violence. Um, so obviously the odds were stacked in my favor. But the other neighbor, who was a criminal, acted like she didn't know him or know Marquise. But Galvino, I'm not so convinced that Galvino did not. They obviously knew of him. I mean, there was a lot of domestic disputes, and he was obviously yelling at his argument at 3 and 4 in the morning. So I'm not so convinced that he didn't know. And the downstairs neighbor was complaining about me being weird, but the guy next door to me, was beating the crap out of his girlfriend. And this is my former place, not the place I live right currently. But he was beating the crap out of his girlfriend, and he lived there a lot longer than I did. And he was establishing territory, which is some of the domestic disputes he was having with his girlfriend. He was establishing territory, and then when it was convenient, he moved to a different city to get away from being discovered for what he did.